Okay, so at this point what we did was we tried our best to create a wheel that looks like the one in the handout, and our goal is to create all 12 colors that we see on the artist's and designer's color wheel, the modern color wheel. And we're going to start with our primary colors. So you don't have to use the paints that are in your kit that you purchased. We can save those for a final painting. We'll just use the cheaper acrylics that we have in class for now. And you don't want to use a lot of either color because we want to make this last for the entire wheel, okay? So I drew my wheel, I divided it into 12 equal parts, and I made sure that I labeled the 3 primary colors, leaving 3 empty spaces between each, because there's going to be 3 new colors between each of the primary colors here that are equally spaced out. So my red is going to get a layer of red. I'm just taking my dry brush, I'm putting it into the paint. Okay, again, with acrylics, you don't require any water to be mixed in. If you want to thin them out, you can always add a little bit of water to the tip of your brush, but you don't have to. And again, this is probably going to be enough to take me through this entire space. So again, I'm practicing using my brush, moving it in different ways to get nice crisp lines. With a flat brush like this, you could get a thick line, right, like this, or you could get a very skinny line, depending on how you angle it. Okay, so practice moving your wrist and moving the brush to get a nice equal unison layer. When I paint, I like to keep my pinky out, or at least leave part of my hand on the paper so that it gives me a little bit of stability. You guys will find what works for you as you go. Okay, so I blocked my red in. I'm going to rinse my brush out really well using my water. And I am going to dry it using my paper towel. Okay, I'm going to switch over to yellow now. So I'm just taking my dry brush, going into the yellow. And again, this is probably going to be enough to block in this entire area. So I'm moving my brush sideways to get a nice crisp line. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush off. Going to dry it off. Now we're going to do the primary blue. So I'm just dipping my brush into the blue. You might even want to turn your wheel as you go. Okay, and now I'm going to rinse my brush. So now I'm going to go back to my pencil, and I'm going to figure out where my secondary colors are. So basically a secondary color has 2 primary parents. If red and yellow are primaries, that center color right in between them is going to be a secondary color. So I'll put a number 2 to remind myself that it's secondary. Okay, and when you mix red and yellow, we should get an orange. So we'll test that out. Moving down here, right in between my blue and my yellow, I should get a secondary color that should end up being green. if I use them in equal amounts. And then if I mix primary red and primary blue, my secondary spot here should be a violet. Or if you're more accustomed to using the word purple, the term purple, I'm okay with that too. I just like using violet because it fits into Roy G. Biv. Okay, now that my brush is nice and clean, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to test out my secondaries to see if this in fact is true. When I'm mixing a darker color into a lighter one, I like to start with adding tiny bits of the darker one into the lighter one just for better control. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a scoop of my yellow and I'm just going to put it off to the side. Okay, and I'm going to take red and I'm going to bring in some red. Maybe not go straight to half and half because red is a lot darker than yellow. Maybe a little less red than yellow. And you want to make a good amount of this new color, like good enough for you to have a blob of it to fill in that triangle and then to play around with for the tertiaries. So I'm going to keep on mixing the two of them until I get a nice medium orange. It's probably going to be slightly less red than yellow. Okay, and then I'm going to fill in the orange section of my wheel. Now that I have my orange here, I'm going to continue to work with it. This side of it, okay, I'm going to mix my orange with my red primary to see if I could get a red orange. Okay, so I'm going to take this this orange that I have here. I'm going to mix more red into it. So now you should have something that's in between this red and the original orange that you had. Make sure that it's not back to full red, okay? It'll look a little bit more like a ketchup, like a bright tomato red. So we would consider the red orange to be a warmer version of the primary red. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush for a second. I'm going to grab my pencil and I'm going to make a note for myself. So this is a tertiary color. It's made up of a primary and a secondary. And if I give it a name, it's red-orange. It cannot be orange-red. It has to begin with the primary parent. So red-orange. In the design world, there's all kinds of names. It could be tangerine, summer orange, fire orange. Right? If you go to a salon and you try to pick out a cool nail polish color, or if you go to a paint store to pick out a wall color, artists come up with really cool names to describe colors. But when we're just talking about them on the color wheel, we're super plain old scientific about it. It's just red-orange, okay? So moving to the other side of the secondary orange, okay? If we were to mix primary yellow with a secondary orange, let's see what we would get. So I'm going to go back to my yellow, right? And I'm going to mix a little bit of that original orange into it. Make sure you're not using up all your yellow because we're going to be using it up for the other side too. Okay, so you'll notice you've got like a really, really light golden mustard color. Make sure it's not the same as the one before it or after it. Your goal is, again, to create different colors here. So if you need to go back and alter it. Okay, so mine's looking a little too yellow right now for my liking. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit more orange to it. So I'm happy with this. I'm happy with this gold color. I actually might make my orange, my secondary orange, a little bit darker, actually. And then maybe I'll give my orange red a different second layer. Yeah, when you do a second layer, it's nice and opaque. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush really, really well now because I'm done this side of the wheel here. Now I'm going to focus on my greens over here.